Welcome back into another edition of the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. I am Steven Serda, joined as always by my guy, Rocky Magaña. Kramer Sansone in the background helping us keep this thing moving. The Kansas City Chiefs preseason finale against the Cleveland Browns. And it was a fun game. The Chiefs come away with a 33-32 victory. They have two first half interceptions that get returned for touchdowns against the Browns. And there's actually quite a bit to take away from this preseason finale that saw most of the Chiefs starters barely get any action. All the big name players did not play at all. And the ones that did play really only played on the first series of each unit. And then after that, it was all nothing but backups in the Chiefs preseason finale. But Rocky, this is about as much as you can ask for from a preseason finale football game. The Chiefs win 33-32 as the Browns shank a field goal at the end of the game, and they're able to run the clock out. And they were down big early in this one. There's also record-breaking crowd at Arrowhead for a preseason football game. This is about as exciting as it gets in the preseason.
Yeah, like you said, the starters this week, they were a lot like me in high school. Very little action. And they said there was 50,000 people there. I'm gonna question it. Like in the first quarter, there was probably 50,000 people there. By the time they were interviewing people in the fourth quarter on the sidelines and Jerry McKinnon was talking, there was not 50,000 people left in that stadium. But you like to see the engagement, Steven Serda. You like to see the engagement from Patrick Mahomes on the sideline in the third preseason of a game that he had nothing to do with, interrupting an interview to say, "Oh, doggone, there's an interception." Yeah, good old boy out there. Like best player to ever play the game, biggest star in the sport, and he is 100% locked in on the third preseason of the game for his teammates, right? Like that was something that was awesome to see. And you told me 2 weeks ago there wasn't a quarterback battle. You said, no, there's not a quarterback battle.
I know.
You're crazy. There's Andy Reid likes to have a veteran quarterback. There's no quarterback battle, Rocky. It's you're imagining things. Shane Buechele's going to get cut. He's going to be a practice squad guy. Well, I'm not saying that Shane Buechele won the job today, but the battle was on.
So, as I mentioned, there's a lot to get into, and that includes the backup quarterback battle for the Kansas City Chiefs. That it does appear I really owe you an apology for that, for just assuming like there's no chance, Rocky. Like, don't hype the people up. Don't act like Shane Buechele actually has a chance at beating out Blaine Gabbert, because we've seen 2 weeks in a row now the Chiefs are giving Shane the nod over Blaine Gabbert before they put him in. I still tend to think that they're going to keep 3 quarterbacks in the end, and they'll decide if it ever comes up whether or not they have to put Shane or Blaine in the game. But we'll figure all that out. We got a lot to discuss before we get out of here, before we wrap up the Chiefs preseason and look ahead towards the regular season, because it's upon us now. It's going to be quiet over the next week or so, but the following week, the Kansas City Chiefs open the NFL season on Thursday Night Football against the Detroit Lions. So I want to, in what turned out to be a pretty exciting football game for the Chiefs today, it started out really ugly. This was a very, very sloppy football game out of the gate for Shane Buechele, for the defense. Just everything was bad. He had the early pick 6, and then the defense just wasn't looking particularly good. But again, they're playing a bunch of backups. And also, I would like to mention, for a lot of people who were like, oh, the Browns look good finally, because the Browns, for some reason, I've watched a lot of Browns preseason football, because if you remember, Rocky, they were in the Hall of Fame game, so that they were that first preseason game of the year, and then they've been on a lot of like prime time kick preseason games for whatever reason, and they have not been playing any of their starters in the preseason. Like, they have been sitting everybody. And then today in the preseason finale, knowing full and well they were likely going up against a lot of backups, they decided to play their starters for the entire first quarter. So I'm not going to read too much into the Chiefs' early game performance in this one, because it was backups going against starters. And while I don't think the Browns are a good football team, they do have some talented players in their starting core. So I think that was tough. And I think for the most part, they held their own against the Browns starters. But it was certainly an ugly football game out of the gate for the Kansas City Chiefs today.
Yeah, like you said, it was a lot of the Chiefs backups playing against the Browns starters. You had Deshaun Watson in there for the entire first quarter, and he looked like garbage. Thank God. He looked like garbage, which is not surprising to me. I'm not a Deshaun Watson fan. I don't hide it whatsoever, and I'm glad he looked terrible. And he may have put up some stats in the end, but he didn't look like a good quarterback today. And he was playing against a backup defense too. So we'll leave that out there. But Shea Buechele at the bat, he's going against the number one defense, and the receivers did not do him a lot of favors. That first interception was a bad decision. He had the check down to the running back there, when he decided to try to throw it across to Justin Ross. Looks like Justin Ross just got tangled up and he didn't get to the spot that Buechele thought he was going to be in. Juan Thornhill knows this offense inside and out, jumped the route, and he wanted to, Juan Thornhill wanted to plant a flag in the end zone, right? Playing against his former team. So it was a bad throw, bad decision by Buechele. But beyond that, I mean, you have the drop by Cornell Powell that leads to an interception. Rashee Rice was trying to make this quarterback battle as interesting as possible by dropping passes for both quarterbacks. He dropped a guaranteed touchdown, at one point. On the other drop that he had, he just needed to turn his hands over. Like it's like he didn't make a good in-air adjustment. And listen, I'm a big Rashee Rice fan. I just drafted him in my fantasy league today, and I'm really high on him as a player. But we're talking 3 weeks in a row that he's dropped a football that he should have caught. And so at some point, you think, MVS has a little bit of drop issues, and he's still a very productive player. But do you really want MVS and Rashee Rice both out there with drop issues on the field at the same time? It's not something that you're going to just say he's a useless player over, but it's definitely something to be alarmed about.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too hard on the Chiefs rookie wide receiver because he's made some plays, and he made some plays today, even after having the brutal drops, including that one from Gabbert that would have been an easy touchdown, and it would have been nice to see him break away and run away from some trailing defenders just to see what that top end speed really looks like with him. But I will also defend him a little bit in that was a bad football from Blaine Gabbert. That was not an easy pass to catch, and it should have been because he was wide open. But it's just tough. He's a rookie wide receiver who's coming from a smaller school and is getting a lot put on his plate because obviously the Chiefs are hopeful that he's going to have an impact this season. I think definitively, through the preseason, I think we've seen more from him than we saw from Sky Moore last year in the preseason. And the Chiefs have gone out of their way to get him the football. I think that his yard after catch ability and tackle breaking ability, we've seen now 2 weeks in a row, really how strong he is after the catch and how hard he is to tackle and bring down. And I think the Chiefs have identified that as part of his game and something that they can deploy him in as a rookie, as a guy that can take a 3-yard pass and get you 12 because he's just a handful to bring down. So I don't want to be too critical of him. The drops are an issue, sure. You mentioned MVS, who we know is going to drop passes every year, but MVS's role is solidified. He is a starting wide receiver. So I don't think the Chiefs are that concerned about it. Obviously, you got to clean that up and get that figured out. I just felt like at the start of this game too, and maybe it's preseason finale, the starters aren't going to be out there. It's all on the backups and all these reserve players who are fighting for roster spots. It just felt like there was a little bit of anxiousness and nervousness out of the gate today from the young players and the guys that are on the roster bubble to try to go out there and make plays, which, you tell yourself as a fan, it's a meaningless preseason game. But this is the biggest game of a lot of these players' lives. And this is potentially a life-changing opportunity if they can fight their way onto the roster and get an NFL paycheck and get guaranteed some kind of NFL salary on an initial 53-man roster in the NFL. So I don't even fault them for that stuff, but it was certainly sloppy and hard to watch out of the gate today.
Well, 100%. And you made an excellent point there that, this is some guy's Super Bowl. This is for some guys today, unfortunately, they've worked their entire lives to be football players. And the dream is ending today for some of those guys. This will be the last game they play. And that sucks. That really sucks. And for a rookie like Rashee Rice, who we know is going to make the team, and he's going to probably have a pretty productive career for us. You're right. It is something that needs to be cleaned up. Jamal Charles had huge fumbling issues early in his career. Tony
Well,
Gonzalez,
Jamal Charles had fumbling issues his entire career.
Probably his
We
entire
never
career,
talked
yeah.
about it.
Yeah, and Tony Gonzalez had drop issues early in his career. He had one season, I think, where he led the league in drops, and so it's something that the players can improve on. And I think that he can improve on. It's just something I think we need to monitor going forward. But you hit on a really good point, I think, with these guys where they're life-changing opportunities here. Like you have a guy like LaMichael Pirine, who has an honest to God chance of making this roster right now, who I think came out and just looked amazing. You have guys like Amir Smith-Marset, who I thought was dead in the water and may have looked like the most electric player on offense today. I mean, Justin Ross had a really good game as well. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting.
I want to get to LaMichael Pirine because I agree with you. I think he is going to make this roster with his late training camp and these last 2 preseason games with his performance in that. But I want to stick in that wide receiver room. And we talked about how sloppy this offense was for pretty much the whole first quarter. But the Chiefs offense finally got it going in the second quarter where Shane Buechele puts up a 9-play, 90-yard drive that ended in this beautiful Justin Ross touchdown that is going to keep Chiefs fans going for the next couple of weeks while they wait for the Chiefs to take the field in week 1 of the regular season. This is the type of thing that you can get out of Justin Ross that I'm not sure anyone outside of Travis Kelce on this team offers. Like, I know Rashee Rice is a bigger body wide receiver, but Ross is even different because we've seen in the preseason so far, he's got some route running ability, and it's serious route running ability. Like, he can get open that way. Like he might not be the fastest guy on the football field, but he's so long and his strides are so big and he's such a good route runner already that he can get himself open that way. And then he's got the size mismatch to go up and get the football this way. And we talk about a tight end like Jody Fortson, who is a lock to make this roster and now might never play for the Chiefs again after going on IR. Justin Ross can find a role on this team this year, even if he's not a guy that winds up playing like 70% of the snaps for the Chiefs this year and winds up being a significant part of the offense. Like if he's just a rotational wide receiver and they really are going to rotate 5 or 6 guys the entirety of the season, Justin Ross can be a weapon specifically like this, just in the red zone, in these red zone packages where Patrick Mahomes can just throw the football up to him. And that's something Chiefs fans should be really excited about. Because Travis Kelce is the only guy we've ever really had who Mahomes can just throw it up and Kelce can just sky up in the end zone and go up and get the football. Justin Ross can do that too. And he looks really good doing it. And Chiefs fans should be really excited about him right now.
I mean, that was what 70% of Jody Fortson's value to the team was in the red zone.
All of Jody Fortson's value to the team.
Hey, Jody Fortson developed us very nicely as a run blocker. Do not besmirch Jody Fortson's name in front of me. I am a big fan. But no, yeah, he was a red zone target. Let's be honest, that's what he was. And that's exactly what Justin Ross has the ability to be, a starting wide receiver in this league, I think, eventually. But out of the gates on this team this year, yeah, red zone targets all day, baby, because he makes 50-50 balls, 65-35 balls, right? And anytime you have that kind of size mismatch and you have a guy who can jump like that, just let him go out there and high point it. I mean, how many of Randy Moss's touchdowns were either high pointed balls like that or him just running away from the player, right? Yeah. I mean, it's really those are the 2 type of catches that Randy Moss made in his career. And he's the greatest of all time to do it. So I'm not saying, Ross is going to be Randy Moss, but I mean, you can make a nice living in the NFL just high pointing balls in the red zone.
Yeah. And, as they continue to develop him as a wide receiver and get him comfortable in the offense, this is a simple way to get him on the field early in the year. And man, it is really, really hard not to be hyped about Justin Ross right now, because I do think that what we've seen from him in the preseason has shown that if he is healthy, and the Chiefs seem to believe he is truly healthy, and this is the first time he's been healthy since last season and really in a couple of years, like he could be a difference maker for this football team. And I think we're going to see his playing time increase as the season goes on. And maybe the same thing can be said about Rashee Rice, because last week Rashee Rice was getting the snaps clearly over Justin Ross. And now this week with the starters sitting, they were both playing a lot. And Rashee Rice played into the second half. And I wonder if he played into the second half of this football game because of the issues he had in the first half. And because the Chiefs were like, we can't have him sitting around lingering on this for 2 weeks. We just got to keep him in there and keep him getting involved and keep getting him reps to show him you got to move past it and just keep trying to go out there and make plays. And Rashee Rice did have a couple of nice plays in the second half. So I think those were important reps for him. But I think through the entirety of the preseason, we have seen that both of these guys are going to be fighting for playing time this season, and both of them are going to have opportunities to have roles on offense. Now, a guy that we've probably overlooked because of how deep this wide receiver room, and it also says a lot about Richie James, by the way, who played a couple of snaps on the first opening drive of the game and then was out the rest of the game. MVS didn't play at all. Sky Moore was in for a couple snaps. Justin Watson was in for a couple snaps. Those are the guys that are above Justin Ross and Rashee Rice right now. Like, we can definitively say that heading into the season. In a month from now, that could be a totally different case, but that's the way that it is set up right now. But a guy that we have really overlooked outside of last week's game against the Arizona Cardinals is Ihmir Smith-Marsette, who continues to just ball out in the preseason. And he went for over 100 yards today, had a long touchdown from Blaine Gabbert, and looked like the most explosive guy in the second half for the Kansas City Chiefs. And it wasn't really that close. And, you know, it's a bummer because he's a player that I think our team at Arrowhead Pride has really liked for a while now. But I just don't know where the path for him to make this team comes from. And he looks great, and he feels like a prime candidate to initial 53. We got to release you, but if you clear waivers, you are our first call for the practice squad. And based on what he's done in the preseason, I just don't see him clearing waivers and making it back to the Chiefs practice squad at this point.
No, I don't see him clearing waivers and making the Chiefs practice squad at this point either. Not with that frame. Like, if he was 5'10" and putting up these numbers, maybe. But he's got size, length, speed. I mean, he's a guy that, yeah, I was super high on him coming out last year, and I was surprised that he was available for the Chiefs to acquire him on their practice squad last year. He's a guy who looks like he's taken a massive step forward. A guy who knew that he needed today in order to have an opportunity. And yeah, you look at the 53-man roster and you say, man, what is the path forward for him making the team? And then you think, is he so good? Can you afford to not have him on the team?
Well, and the editor-in-chief of Arrowhead Pride, Pete Sweeney, I think tweeted out during the game after the Ihmir Smith-Marsette long touchdown, just whatever, just keep 8 wide receivers. I don't care anymore. And
well, that's what I'm saying.
Like, yeah, but then you have to make a tough decision somewhere else. And
is it a tight end? Do you keep 2 tight ends off the bat? Cut Blake Bell, cut Bushman.
I mean, I think if you cut Blake Bell and Matt Bushman, I think those guys will be available to revert back to your practice squad if you want to bring them back. I don't think Ihmir Smith-Marsette's gonna be.
Yeah, and so you almost have to play that game right there. You think, okay, who am I going to need to break glass in case of emergency, and who's going to be there, right? And at this point, Ihmir Smith-Marsette is much more valuable chip than a guy like a Matt Bushman or a Blake Bell. I mean, there's so many decisions to be made, Steven Serda, and there's so many good players on this offensive roster.
Before we get out of here, we'll talk about that a little bit because next week, by the way, Arrowhead Pride, we are going to our full regular season lineup starting on Monday. So starting Monday, we will have a different show for you every single day of the week, Monday through Sunday. Next week, we won't have one on Sunday because we'll be waiting on the Chiefs to start the regular season. But once the regular season starts, we'll be right here with a rapid reaction show immediately following every Chiefs game. But starting next week, we will have shows for you every single day on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. And on Tuesday, Cut Down Day, we will have a live edition of the Out of Structure podcast where several of us will be jumping on to immediately react to the Chiefs' initial 53-man roster. So make sure you're out on the lookout for that on Tuesday. But I want to talk about that stuff a little bit before we get out of here. But you mentioned LaMichael Pirine, and I want to talk about him because I think we had this idea that this running back room was totally set. And I still think that it is to an extent. Like, it's obviously Isaiah Pacheco, it's Jerick McKinnon. And I was talking with Show and BK a little bit in the group chat before we came on here. And, Brandon Kiley's like, Michael Pirine's better than Clyde. And while that may very well be the case, I think Clyde's role on this team is absolutely solidified, or at least on the roster. Maybe he's not going to have a significant role offensively for this team this year, but he is going to make the team unless the Chiefs decide that to trade him or somebody offers them something with, there's some running back needy teams out there who maybe don't want to pay top dollar for a veteran like Kareem Hunt or Leonard Fournette or something like that. You could have Clyde pretty cheap probably, but barring something like that manifesting, Clyde is on this team. And we thought Deneric Prince was going to be that guy. And after this crazy hot start to training camp where everybody was raving about all the plays he was making, he has just totally faded and kind of disappeared to where he has been totally relegated to he is only returning kicks when he's with the third and fourth string teams. He is only getting handoffs in the late third and fourth quarter of preseason games. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with LaMichael Pirine's quiet performance in training camp and ascension throughout training camp and throughout the preseason, where he looks really good. And he had that long touchdown today where he's breaking tackles and looking fantastic. Like LaMichael Pirine, I think, is probably going to make this team. And after these performances that he's put together in back-to-back weeks, he definitely deserves it.
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy where when the opportunity was presented to him that he did that Eminem 8 Mile, like you get one shot, one opportunity, you got to seize it, right? And he's a guy who wasn't highly recruited in college and then kind of made his own way in college. He's a guy who wasn't drafted in the NFL, kind of made his own way. You like to root for those guys, especially when those guys can pass protect and they look electric with the ball in their hands. And it's not, you're right. Like maybe he does look better than Clyde Edwards-Helaire right now, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire is guaranteed, he has $2.5 million of dead cap attached to his name. Like the Chiefs aren't going to just cut Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So unless they find a trade partner, they're not going to move on from Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So you're looking at the Chiefs keeping 4 running backs and them keeping Pirine over Deneric Prince, which at this point, I think with Amir Smith-Marset returning kicks like he did today, with Richie James returning kicks like he has all preseason, I think it's a no-brainer at this point that you go with Pirine over Deneric Prince.
Yeah, and maybe the Chiefs still like Prince enough that he's a player who could come back to their practice squad if they release him. But I think it's pretty clear that a guy it felt like we thought was going to be a lock for this team, and like another one of these like undrafted finds for the Kansas City Chiefs, hasn't really manifested that way through the preseason. And it's a bummer for Deneric Prince, but I think the Chiefs still like him. I think he's still a practice squad candidate, and they would like to bring him back and give him a chance to develop a little bit if they can. But we'll see how that goes. And yeah, I forgot to even mention, like Isaiah Pacheco finally got some contact, and we saw him get his non-contact jersey taken off this week. And this was always the timeline the Chiefs had kind of leaked out there, that this week was the week they were going to try to ramp him back up, see how everything's doing after the offseason shoulder surgery. And he only had the 1 carry, I believe, but he showed the pop and he showed the angry Isaiah Pacheco run that you want to see. So I think Chiefs fans should be excited about that. It's also worth mentioning that Tershawn Wharton got in the mix and got some snaps today. And that's big for him because both of those guys, that was the first preseason action that they have seen so far. And both of them getting in a game and getting to hit some people, I think is big. Tershawn Wharton could wind up being really important for this defensive line while the Chris Jones saga continues to play out. And at this point, we have absolutely no idea if Chris Jones is going to be there week 1 for the Kansas City Chiefs.
No idea whatsoever. And at least you can't count on him for a full snap count, even if he is there at this point. And yeah, I'm a big Turk Wharton fan. Have you seen the size of that man's thighs? That man looks like he could leg press the state of Texas, the entire state of Texas all at once. That man has the biggest legs I have ever seen. But another guy that showed out who I kind of want to talk about a little bit is rookie, Felix Anudike-Uzomah. I mean, have you seen throughout these 3 weeks of the preseason, it looks like he's steadily ramped up and gotten better and better and better. But my goodness, in the open field, I can't think of an edge rusher in the last 5 years that the Chiefs have had who's faster. Like he looks like he's the fastest and most athletic edge rusher that the Chiefs have had in a really long time.
Yeah, he looks explosive. He looks really good through the last couple of preseason games, and he looks like the most versatile pass rusher that they might have on the team right now, outside of Chris Jones. Um, and Charles Omenihu got a sack today. Joshua Kando looked pretty good in the second half there. I think he's another roster bubble player who is a young guy who's had some injuries and trying to find a role for the Kansas City Chiefs. But he had a nice second half today, and Felix, I think we've really underestimated how important Felix and his development is going to be to the early season Kansas City Chiefs defensive line, because we don't know if Chris Jones is going to be there. We know for a fact Charles Omenihu is not going to be available for the first 6 weeks of the season. And so this defensive line that we initially thought, especially at the edge and pass rush, that we thought was going to be this huge strength for this defense, and their young secondary going into year 2 for a lot of these players and ready to take a step and become one of the better defenses in the NFL, that's all kind of gone out the window with Chris Jones and his absence and this ongoing negotiation or lack of negotiation. So seeing Felix look like he deserved to be that first round pick for the Kansas City Chiefs, I think is a big win coming out of the preseason.
Oh, it's a huge win. And it gives you an opportunity to kind of just like slow down, take a deep breath, think that the Chiefs can weather the storm while this all sorts out. They still got George Karlaftis, who continues to look like a better player than he was last year. Really, honestly, it might not even be the pass rush where they missed Jones the most. Danny Shelton did not look good today. The slimmed down, new and improved Danny Shelton did not play well today. That was a bummer because the Chiefs need a guy like him to step up and to be able to be like that big body in the middle, especially on run defense. And it was really disappointing to see him play the way that he did. But man, there's so many roster bubble guys that you just want to root for. Like Khalif Halasi looked great today. DiCaprio Boodle got a pick.
Halasi, I think, is another prime practice squad candidate. He's made plays in the preseason, and in back-to-back games, he was making plays for the Chiefs defense late in the football game. Keandre Coburn is another guy we haven't seen a ton of, but we've seen him getting more and more work with the upper echelon unit on the defense. And I think he's a guy that hopefully you can see something out of him. He's out a defensive lineman out of Texas. And so you hope the Chiefs can develop him into something there. But there's reason to be concerned about this defensive line, especially going into week 1. I know it's against the Detroit Lions, and you think to yourself, it's the Lions. Why would we care about the Lions? But the Lions actually have one of the 3 to 5 best offensive lines in football, and they're coming off a year where they were one of the best offenses in the league, and they're probably better this season. So it should be a little bit concerning.
Yeah, they added a little guy named Jahmyr Gibbs very early in the draft, who may have been the best, athlete in the draft last year. He might be the most electric player in the entire draft. And if they get him the ball out in space, or they get the ball behind that give him the ball behind that offensive line, it could get ugly fast. And we could find ourselves in a situation where Mahomes is having to, go toe to toe right out of the gates and try to slug our way, through this game, because while this defense has the ability to be a top 10 defense, it's also going to take some time to gel, I think. And I think that as the season goes on, and as the Chris Jones situation starts to resolve itself, and we start getting Charles Omenihu back, by the time we hit week 8, 9, like, this is going to be a totally different looking defense, and it's going to look against the Detroit Lions. So looking forward to the Detroit Lions, you almost are thinking to yourself that on the defensive side of the ball, that's just a game they have to survive.
And before we get out of here, we have to mention DiCaprio Boodle, who has had a rough preseason and training camp, did come up with a big late game interception that helped lead the Chiefs to this comeback win. And then that led to a Matt Bushman touchdown from Chris Oladukin. And Oladukin looks good too. And Matt Bushman's a roster bubble guy. So you just like to see that late game connection from them, and especially in a game that was so close. And the Chiefs came back and won. But we don't need to spend
greatest comeback in Chiefs history today, ladies and gentlemen.
I just wanted to shout them out before we get out of here. But again, I want to remind you guys, if you're listening to us on the podcast page, we'll have all the post-game press conferences available for you immediately after the break. And coming up live on Tuesday, we'll have a live edition of Out of Structure as we break down the Chiefs' initial 53-man roster. And Rocky, there's a lot of questions to be answered about this 53 and some kind of complicated navigation to be had, because barring a last minute like emergency Chris Jones extension that gets worked out, the Chiefs cap is kind of in a rough spot right now. They currently do not have enough money on the books to pay their entire 53-man roster along with the practice squad, which means they could have to get creative on Tuesday and make some difficult decisions that they don't want to make. And a lot of that comes back to them not being able to get this deal done with Chris Jones. So it could be complicated on Tuesday, and we could see them have to let go of some players that we are not expecting them to let go of.
I mean, 100%. And while you hope that Jones is going to be here, you can't count on it by any means. And like, it would be shocking to see a guy that you fully expect to make this roster. Like, I don't know, just for a Noah Gray, right? Like, I 100% think that there's no chance that the Noah Gray doesn't make this roster, but there's going to be a guy like that, most likely, that you're going to wake up or be checking your phone on Tuesday afternoon. You're going to be like, what the heck? Like, what? Like why? And the Chiefs are going to lose that guy. And it's just in the nature of the salary cap, and it's going to happen around the league too. So even if a guy makes the 50-man 3-man roster, call us a week from now, because guys who get dropped off of other teams are going to be picked up by the Chiefs or another team around the league too. So this is an ever evolving situation.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out for the Kansas City Chiefs on Tuesday. That deadline's at 3 p.m. Arrowhead time. But before we get out of here, please make sure, as always, you follow Rocky on Twitter at Rocky Magaña. You can follow Kramer at Kramer Talks. I'm Steven Serda. That's where you can find me. Again, the Arrowhead Pride full regular season lineup rolls out on Monday. We will have a show for you each and every day of the week, all throughout the entire NFL season, covering the defending Super Bowl champions like nobody else can. So we're excited. The preseason's over, and now it's on to the regular season, and we're going to find out if the Kansas City Chiefs can try to repeat as Super Bowl champions. We'll talk to you guys again on Monday.